Okay, so together as a class we've now hopefully had a look at an algorithm which would be used for a random number guesser, and our next step is to actually create an application that is going to be our game, the random number guesser game. Now in order to do that we're going to have to design a form. Now if you're going to follow along with my code, then you'll need to use the same names that I use in my form. And so I'm going to run through that now. So first of all, our form design. So remember, you start Visual Studio, start a new project. We want a Windows Forms project that's using C#. Give it a name, something like Random Tester or Random Number Generator as a good name for your project. Now, once you've got your form, we're going to first of all change the label that appears across the top of the form. So to do that, what you'll need to do is find the text property. So I've clicked on the form, find the text property, and you can see that I've changed the text to random number guesser. Okay, so that's the form, changed to random number guesser. Then on that form we want a couple of labels. So this top label here is, we're not going to worry about a name for that label, but we are going to change the text property to say enter your guess below, then check it. So if you come across to your toolbox and you find an object which is called a label right there, drag the label onto your form and change the text property for that label to enter your guess below. Okay, now the other label we're going to need is going to be a feedback label. Now because we're going to deal with this one in code, we actually have to know the name of it. Okay, so I've given the name, I've once again added a label to my form, and this label I've called LBL feedback. So if you scroll to the top of your properties, find the name property and name it LBL feedback, and then we have to enter some startup text, what it's going to look like on the start. And so the first bit of feedback we're going to give to the user of our game is to enter a guess. Now this is going to change. When they enter a guess and the guess is too high, it's going to tell them that's too high, guess again. When it's too low, it's going to say too low, try a higher number. And when they get it, it's going to say something like woohoo, that's exactly right. Alright, so enter some startup text, which is just enter your text. Okay, so that's our two labels. The other object we're going to use on our form is a numeric updown. Okay, and that's an object that you can find down here, numeric updown, and what it allows you to do is enter numeric values on your form. Now it's only going to let them enter in a value within a certain range. So the first property we're going to need to edit is the minimum value and the maximum value. So we want them only to be able to enter starting numbers between 0 and 10, and that's going to set the limits for this text box. The other thing we're going to have to do is change the name of that numeric updown to something that we can remember and use in code. So I've called it numGuess. So make sure you change the name, the minimum property, and the maximum property. And the final object we need on our form is a button. And when you click the button, it's going to check whether or not your guess is equal to or not equal to or higher or lower than the random number. So we're going to name that btn check. You can see I've named it over here. And the text is going to be changed to something like check. You could make it check my guess or something similar. Okay, so can you pause me here? Rewind me if you need to recheck those instructions. Create that form in Visual Studio so that we can then generate the code for the random number guesser. Okay, hopefully you paused me. Now we're going to run through the code section of this. So remember, once again, we've got our numGuess object, we've got our btn check object, and we've got our LBL feedback object. Those are the three objects we're going to use in code, so they need to have those three names. Okay. Once you've done that, the first thing we're going to do is need to have a storage location to actually store our variable, store the number that people are trying to guess. Okay, so if you double click on one of those objects, it'll take you into the code design window, and then what I'd like you to do is scroll to the very top of that and find the line that's going to be line number 13, which is public partial class form1. Inside of the curly brackets below that, we're going to declare our variable, and it's going to be an integer. And so what we do to declare that variable is simply write int num equals 0 and put the semicolon, just like my example there. And so what this is going to do is set up a storage location which is called num, and it's going to be equal to 0. That's the number that people have to guess. And we're just giving it a startup value. It's not going to be num when the game, it's not going to be 0 when the game actually starts, because what we're going to do next is edit the form load event. So come back to your form, double click on the form, and you'll see it creates an event for the object form1, which is called load. And when form1 loads, what we're going to do is generate a random number and store that random number inside the variable that we created. And that's what those two lines do there. So line 29 and 30 in my code, you'll see I'm saying what we want is a new random. So I've got a random method, and I've named the variable random is going to be a whole collection of new random numbers. So that's what that line there does. And then this integer number is going to become equal to the next random, which is between 0 and 10. So if you can write those two lines, you'll then have some code which is going to generate a random number for your game. The final part of our code needs to check whether or not our guess is equal to that random number. So we want that to happen when we click on this check button. So if you double click on the check button back in the form, it'll take you into the procedure which is called button check click. And within that procedure, or within that event, what we want to do is check the value of the num guess object and compare it with the value that is our integer, num. So to do that, we say if numGuess.value is less than num. So that means our guess is less than the generated random number. And then we're going to change our label feedback text. So the label feedback text then is going to become equal to the guess. So if they guess 3, then it's going to write 3. 3 is too low, guess again. If it's not less than that, we want to keep going. So I've got an else if. So the else if is going to say else if the num guess value is equal to the number, they got it right, then it's going to change the feedback line to woohoo, the number is whatever the number was that they chose. Otherwise, it's going to do one final test. Now this is going to be the default, because if the two top things haven't occurred, then it's got to be this choice. Else if the number guess value is greater than number, then it's going to write yes, it's too high, guess again, or the number is too high, guess again. And so that's then our code. And so then when we run our procedure, we get our little window pop up. We can have our first guess. Let's say 5, check it. 5 is too low, guess again, so it's got to be higher. 7. 7 is too low, guess again. 9 is too high, and so hopefully our random number is going to be 8. Woohoo, the number is 8. Alright, so your extension, if you're able to do that one, what I'd like you to do at the moment, this only generates one random number and then the game's finished. So what I'd like you to do is, if they get it correct, give them the opportunity to play again. So have a button appear saying, would you like to play again? And if they do, then generate a new random number and repeat the program. The other thing I'd like you to have a look at doing is, instead of a number between 0 and 10, make the number guesser operate for a number between 0 and 100. And the third extension activity, if you're able to do it, is to actually count the number of guesses that the person has. So at the moment this is just a simple one. It runs once, doesn't count how many guesses they got, but I'd like an incrementing counter so that every time they have a guess, the variable increments and says you've had 3 guesses, you've had 4 guesses, and so on. Right, so those are your extension activities to work on now. Right, have a go at that and good luck.